In the heart of the Welsh valleys, where the hills roll like green waves and mist clings to the ancient landscape, silence isn't just an absence of noise, it's a presence. It's the deep, humming quiet of a place that has seen centuries come and go. It's the kind of quiet that locals are born into, that they understand. So when the Clydach family vanished, the silence that followed wasn't immediately alarming. It was just more silence. The Clydach family, Elwyn, his wife Mare, and their 2 teenage children, Rhys and Megan, weren't famous or wealthy. They were the kind of people who formed the backbone of a community. Elwyn worked at the local colliery before it closed, then took on odd jobs. Mare was a part-time nurse, known for her gentle hands and calming voice. Rhys was a quiet boy, always with a book, while Megan was the opposite. Her laughter, a familiar sound bouncing off the slate-roofed houses. They were ordinary, dependable, woven into the fabric of their small town. Their disappearance was as quiet as a feather falling on snow. There was no sign of a struggle at their small terraced house on Oak Street. The front door was locked. The curtains were drawn, just as they would be at night. Inside, half-eaten meals were left on the table. A game of Monopoly paused mid-play on the living room floor. Mare's knitting lay in a basket, a half-finished scarf still on the needles. It was as if they had simply evaporated. For the first few days, no one noticed. Or rather, no one thought it was anything to notice. The postman, Dewey, saw the mail piling up, but figured they'd gone on a last-minute holiday. It was the end of summer, after all. Their next-door neighbor, Mrs. Evans, didn't hear their usual morning bustle, but her hearing wasn't what it used to be. The kids hadn't been seen at the park, but teenagers are fickle. In a town where everyone knows everyone, there's also a deep-seated respect for privacy. You don't pry. It was Mare's sister Shian who finally raised the alarm. She lived a few towns over and had been trying to call for a week. The phone just rang and rang unanswered. Finally, a knot of worry tightening in her stomach, she drove to their house. Peering through the letterbox, she saw the pile of mail on the mat and the eerie stillness within. That's when she called the police. When officers first entered the house, they were met with a scene of unsettling domesticity. It was a perfect snapshot of a life interrupted. There was no forced entry, no broken glass, no overturned furniture. The family car was still parked in its usual spot. Their passports were in a drawer upstairs. Their bank accounts remained untouched. It was a disappearance so clean, so absolute, it defied logic. They hadn't packed, they hadn't fled, they had just gone. The investigation began, and the silence of the town was replaced by the hum of police activity and the whispers of worried residents. The police questioned everyone. Neighbors, friends, colleagues. The story was always the same. They were a normal, happy family. No major debts, no secret enemies, no known marital problems. Elwyn was a bit of a loner, some said kept to himself since the mine closed. Mare was universally loved. The kids were good kids. The police divers searched the nearby reservoirs and the murky depths of the old quarry lake. Search and rescue teams, with their trained dogs, combed the dense woods and windswept hills that surrounded the town. They found nothing. No footprint, no scrap of clothing, no clue. It was as if the very land had swallowed them whole. As days turned into weeks, the media descended. The story of the silent disappearance from the Welsh Valley became national news. The vanished family, the headlines called them. Theories began to fly, each more fantastic than the last. Had they been abducted? But who would abduct an entire family and leave no trace, no ransom note? Had they entered some kind of witness protection program? But why? They had no known connections to any criminal activity. Then the local folklore started to creep in. Whispers of the Tylwyth Teg, the fair folk of Welsh legend who were said to steal people away into the hills. Older residents would talk in hushed tones about strange lights seen over the mountains, about old pacts and forgotten paths. Of course, the police dismissed these as fanciful tales, born of fear and a lack of answers, but in a place so steeped in history and myth, where the line between the real and the imagined can sometimes blur, the stories took root in the community's imagination. They offered a kind of explanation, however supernatural, for the inexplicable. The investigation grew cold. The police files remained open, but active leads dried up. The house on Oak Street was eventually emptied and sold, its contents stored away in a sterile police lockup. Life in the town slowly returned to a semblance of normality, but the silence was different now. It was heavier. It was filled with the unspoken question that hung over every conversation, every gathering. What happened to the Clydach family? Years passed, a decade. Then too, Cheyenne. She kept their story alive, giving interviews on the anniversaries of their disappearance, pleading for anyone with information to come forward. She grew old with the mystery, her face a map of grief and unanswered questions. The children who grew up after the disappearance knew the Clydachs only as a ghost story, a cautionary tale whispered on dark nights. Then, nearly 25 years after they vanished, a discovery was made. A group of geology students were surveying a remote, abandoned slate mine, a place that hadn't been entered in over a century. The entrance was treacherous, partially collapsed and hidden by overgrown brambles. Deep within the cold, dark labyrinth of the mine, in a chamber far off the main tunnels, they found it. A small, makeshift living space. Tattered blankets, rusted tins of food, a crude table and chairs carved from stone. And in a rotted wooden chest, a collection of journals. The handwriting was identified as Elwyn Clydach's. The journals told an astonishing story. Elwyn, it turned out, had become obsessed with the idea of a global catastrophe. He wasn't a doomsday prepper in the modern sense. His fear was more philosophical, almost spiritual. He believed the outside world had become corrupt, noisy, and soulless. He wrote of a great silence that was coming, a cleansing of the world, and he felt a profound, obsessive need to protect his family from it. He had spent years secretly preparing the old mine, a place he knew from his youth, stocking it with supplies. His writings revealed a man not of malice, but of deep, misguided love. He convinced his family that they were going on a great adventure, a secret retreat where they would be safe from the ills of the world. The journals described their first few months in the mine. He wrote of their initial fear turning to a strange kind of contentment in the quiet dark. He taught his children geology and told them stories of the old miners. Mer had set up a small infirmary. They had created a new world for themselves, underground, but the journals became more erratic. The supplies dwindled faster than he'd anticipated. The perpetual darkness and isolation began to take their toll. He wrote of his wife's growing despair, of his children's longing for the sun. The final entries were fragmented, desperate. He wrote of an illness, a fever that swept through them, likely from contaminated water or spoiled food. He wrote of his own weakening state, his regret, his terror. The last entry was a single, barely legible sentence. "The silence is not what I thought. It is not peace, it is only empty." The authorities found their remains in a deeper part of the chamber, where Elwyn had laid his family to rest before succumbing himself. They hadn't been taken. They hadn't been harmed by an outsider. They had been led into the dark by a father's love, twisted by fear into a fatal obsession. They didn't vanish in an instant. They faded away, slowly, in the cold, silent earth beneath the hills they had called home. The mystery was solved, but the tragedy only deepened. The silence that had surrounded their disappearance was not the silence of a clean escape, but the muffled silence of a tomb. The people of the valley finally had an answer, but it brought no comfort. It was a stark reminder that sometimes the most terrifying dangers don't come from the outside world, but from the quiet, hidden places within the human heart. And in the Welsh valleys, the silence now carries a new weight, a new sorrow. It holds the memory of a family who went looking for peace and found only an endless quiet. Thank you for watching. If you found this story compelling, please consider subscribing and hitting the bell icon for more deep dives into mysteries from around the world. Stay safe and stay curious.